Our tohu at the time was Tamatoa, Tamaora, Tamanoho, Tamamate, Tamatoa. So, meaning, stand up and do something. Don't sit and do nothing.
We knew something was wrong, and so we were going to do something about it.
I think for most Pākehā were quite shocked by that. We were meant to be very obedient.
Every now and then when there's a real stroppy issue, Tamatu, Tamaora, Tamanoho, Tamamate, Tamatoa, I look straight away to the speaker and see who it is.
Right.
And I know that person must be an old Ngā Tamatoa.
In 1971, revolution was in the air. Civil rights, women's rights and anti-Vietnam War. 3 out of 4 Māori now lived in the cities, but were still at the bottom of the heap for housing, health and employment. The urban youth's response was Ngā Tamatoa.
I was just 16, a schoolboy here at Hillary College in Otara when I joined Ngā Tamatoa. Those years of political activism helped shape the rest of my life and perhaps helped shape Aotearoa as we know it.
Ngā Tamatoa was prepared to put themselves out on the front line when on the other side was the whole of Pākehā and a goodly percentage of Māoridom as well.
Ngā Tamatoa forced the issue on land rights and recognition for the Treaty of Waitangi.
Hello to all of you. Hello to all of you.
It drove Māori language into the classroom. Ngā Tamatoa was a generation of young people prepared to stand up and fight the system.
There was the full gamut of feelings amongst the group, from the totally non-aggressive approach to the let's take up arms, let's have a violent uprising and die for the cause. And I was one of those who was prepared to die for that cause. Growing up in Otara helped politicise me and several others that were growing up there.
I was a prefect and top student, but looking around I could see our people were struggling.
There was no library, there was no gymnasium. There was a feeling that we'd been dumped there and not much thought had been given, an area that was pretty much going to have a whole lot of teenage kids bored with nothing to do. And that made me angry that there were the haves and the don't-haves. It was pretty clear that the don't-haves were mostly Māori and Pacific Islanders.
Ngā Tamatoa emerged out of a week-long Young Māori Leaders Hui at Auckland University. The hui was called by Māori Studies Department lecturer Ranginui Walker.
They were talking brown power, black power, Māori Revolutionary Front, bathing the streets in blood. In other words, the rhetoric paralleling that of the Black Power movement in America. And after hearing all this rhetoric, they were deciding on a name, what to call themselves. I suggested they name themselves Ngā Tamatoa, the Young Warriors.
I clearly remember the formation of Ngā Tamatoa. I was there.
But I remember you at the plenary sessions and where we made all of those resolutions as the one who stood up and was wanting to have some action.
It'll be to all these huis. Hui, 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 nothing happens. Why bring us here just to talk and then send us off again? There was no one to lead. And so by default, if there was going to be anyone else, then it must be us.
Sid and Hannah Jackson quickly emerged as the dynamic leaders.
Hannah, because she was a star, had great passion, was a fantastic orator and could stir an audience. And Sid, because of his political astuteness.
At Hillary College, a like-minded student was Hilda Halkyard, who later married Hone Harawira.
I went to an Tamatoa meeting with another boyfriend. So that was before I even left school. Hone got dragged in, I think, because he didn't really want to be there. His mother was sort of hard out on it.
I realised that if I wanted to get Hilda. I'd better be at exactly the same sorts of things she was at.
The Walker brothers, sons of Ranginui Walker, also joined Ngā Tamatoa aged 16 and 17.
We had a very, very middle-class, city-based Auckland, European-type upbringing in the city, really, and recognising that, there was more to our lives than that, I think.
The welcome was warm and friendly, and eventually Hannah came in and told us that our father had said, "We've got a couple of little Pākehās coming along to your meeting tonight."
When the troops were, out on the march, I sort of, hid behind somewhere, hid on the bus or something, I can't remember exactly, but I certainly was not going to get into anything too serious.
When the Walker brothers met Tamaiti, they knew they'd achieved their goal of connecting to their taha Māori.
He appeared on the scene like something out of the Tūhoi Mountains that he really is. Something that, I think many of us were thinking this was, the man we would aspire to be, even though we were weedy little city kids. And here he was in his army boots and his dungarees, and speaking Maori from the moment he could first open his mouth, whereas the rest of us were still struggling with tēnā koe.
Ngā Tamatoa was strongly urban, with branches in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. After Hillary College, I headed to drama school and joined Wellington's Ngā Tamatoa, with, among others, Te Ata Witihira. Koe tēnei.
Ko nākau.
Kia ora ni
Kihi.
I was only a 16-year-old, not long arrived in Wellington. Out of Manor Street came this hikoi, this march. It was a march against Vietnam. And in that march there was a contingent of Māori. They were saying, "Oh, haere mai, haere mai." So I was a young Māori and these were Māori saying haere mai, so I went and joined them.
And that was us.
And that was us.
Yeah. I remember Wellington Ngā Tamatoa for standing up for young Māori in the court system. Hey. Vern Winitana and Te Ata led that kaupapa.
In 1972, I was a probation officer, and so I had a little bit of an understanding about the systems of the court. So we decided we would supply support or provide support to people.
Some of the Māori boys in Tamatoa who are studying law full-time have said that they'll come back and work in this office full-time, just for their Māori people.
We were able to develop what I think was the beginnings of the duty solicitor scheme.
Prior to that work in the courts, I had an experience where I went to a nightclub, the Downtown Club, and I got involved in a scuffle. Really it was over one of the women in there being harassed. And the judge said to me, "And how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?" I said, "Guilty." The reason I pleaded guilty was because I was whakamā. I'd never been in front of the courts before. So in going into the courts to do that work, I could see the same thing happening. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty? Guilty. Why? Because people just want to get in and get out.
It hardly sounds revolutionary, but we faced constant accusations of militancy and violence.
There's a group of radical Māori activists planning the overthrow of the New Zealand government.
If providing legal rights for Maori children in courts is violence, and we're guilty of it, but at no time have we taken part in any action which could be construed as violent.
Well, there must be some reason for these charges. Why do you think they've come up?
I think the reason is because Tamatoa is new in that it's come into the public place and is saying the things in English and without the politeness that Maoris traditionally have had, but have stated the grievances that Maoris have for years spoken in Māori on the marae.
There was some guy in Auckland who spoke with the Waikato Times that I was training all these revolution only because we had karate classes. And because a lot of my students were Black Power, Mongrel Mob members, they were saying that we were training up the revolutionaries, to take over the country. And,
that rings a bell today.
Well, it does, doesn't it?
While in Ngā Tamatoa, Vern played rugby for the North Island team and was a junior and Māori All Black.
And then promptly told that I wouldn't be needed for any more rugby in New Zealand. So I think my Ngā Tamatoa past maybe had caught up with me.
You got any regrets?
No regrets.
Nah.
No. The ideals that we held in those days were far more reaching, far more long-term than kicking a pigskin bladder around the paddock.
The purpose of this school is to begin training.
Over the past 40 years, Ngā Tamatoa has lost several of its warriors. Hana passed away in 1999 and Sid in 2007. They were both huge influences on all of us.
Most of what I initially learned in terms of politics, I learned from him. But the enduring memory is just this kind, loving, generous big brother, really.
I was very sad. I was overseas when that happened, and I was deeply, deeply sad that I couldn't join you all.
There's a poem which you wrote that he asked to be read, and so I read that on the last night.
And soon we'll be together, and we will rise as one, no longer razzle-dazzled, for we are not homeless, nor are we lacking spirit.
Canada, stop taking up our people!
It's about when the treaty was signed, and I don't know much else. Like how Māoris and Pākehā came together, and like we just made peace through signing the one treaty.
Waitangi is where Ngā Tamatoa really made its presence felt. John Miller captured most of that historic action.
Still doing, still taking photos here.
Yeah, 41 years.
You were here in 71?
Yeah, like you.
Like me?
Yeah. Oh, now this is a very celebrated incident. Paul Kotara attempting to set fire to the White Ensign with a copy of the People's Voice. And up the top there is the top of James K. Baxter's head.
Oh.
The Navy rushed over and rescues the flag and put it back up to the flagpole.
I think part of the reason for Paul doing that was the frustration at an early attempt to cut down the flagpole. I was a kid, so I was in the background all the time. But I heard it being plotted, and so I was watching it all. But they only took an axe, and of course...
It's steel.
It's steel.
Another time, the Pacific Island civil rights group Polynesian Panthers joined Ngā Tamatoa to attack the flagpole.
We're all set to go, axes and everything all ready to do the business, but we turned around and some of our Māori members weren't there, and we felt it was a bit hard for us, Islanders and an Indian, to actually do the work, so we kind of cancelled that particular thing, but we thought, typical Māori time.
We focused on Waitangi Day to highlight the treaty that did not deliver what Māori had signed up for.
At Waitangi Day this year, a number of Maoris, headed by the Tamatoa Council members, will wear the sign of mourning as well as being dressed in black.
Well, up until now, the Waitangi Day itself has been treated as a day of celebration, and the Tamatoa Council, along with many other Maori groups, feel it is no day to celebrate. In fact, we feel it's a day to mourn.
That ceremony of the mourning of the tangihanga is a very sacred ceremony to the Maori people. I wouldn't be a bit surprised that if they do it quite publicly during the ceremonial part, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some of the elders will attack them.
This was a new phenomenon, the alienated urban youth. And they were impatient for change. And in fact, they were totally alienated from the elders. They took the view, you guys have had your turn, move aside.
Then, of course, in the evening, you have Muldoon in the centre. Hana has got out into the ground. Here's the big scrum where everyone's being pushed back, and Jim Baxter's getting stomped on and shins kicked by the hobnail boots of the sailors.
And that's as rough as it got. In retrospect, 1971 was tame. In 72, we raised the stakes.
This is the Ngā Tamatoa Plus supporters, including a young urban Māori gang from Otara called Stormtroopers.
Yep.
Who were incidentally...
A lot of my mates.
Waitangi 72 also shows Ngā Tamatoa was becoming a who's who of movers and shakers in years to come.
Here's this quite a well-known image of Taura Erewera and Tame and Donna Awatere and present Te Puni Kōkiri, Auckland head Pauline Kingi. And down here is Betty Walk of Aroha Nui.
Again, Hannah Jackson made a stand.
So that's her speaking at Te Ti?
Yeah. I think Nicky Conrad from Te Ao Pauri mentioned a certain aphorism about chickens and necks. Up our way, when a chicken squawks, we wring its neck. And apparently Hannah sort of says, oh, well, come and try. Then, of course, the following day, the police were prepared. They had 2 busloads. They had 2 busloads of cops brought in to keep law and order. This is when the commemorations started. Everyone moved up to the rope barrier and the police are sort of there waiting for the charge, and then on a signal everyone turned left and walked out, leaving the cops guarding a rope and Tame, who stayed behind. And they actually grabbed him, marched him to the gate and threw him through the air out the gate.
Professor Paul Moon describes the incident in his recent book on New Zealand history.
Tame decried 2 of the most senior Māori present, Bishop Bennett and Kingi Ehaka, accusing them of being traitors and then pointing to a Union Jack flag and suggesting that it be pulled down and used to wipe their snotty noses.
Later, Waitangi became the domain of the Harawiras. Often without the support of their own people, they led protests well into the 1980s.
Waitangi is sort of home territory. I guess a lot of that was always going to need to be led by people from the north.
Can you accept that winner when you know that tomorrow you're going to lose your land?
Were you there when the fellas got chucked off the marae by? Well, Tupi tried to...
I think so, oh yeah.
Toro tried to run Mangu down on his horse and all that kind of carry on. And
good old days.
Good old days.
Whānau days.
All the relations trying to kill you.
Our refuge was the late Tāwai Kawiti's marae Te Rapunga at Waioomio. It was a place of safety from angry Pākehā, Māori and police.
And I can remember one year we were at Kawiti, the mist was down low and we knew that there were cops up there waiting, watching us. So we decided that we'd run out under the kuhu. So we ran all the way to Waitangi, and then the cops, they came to Waitangi, we'd go...
But for about a decade, in the eyes of many New Zealanders, the Harawiras were public enemy #1.
I think even we were kind of called like fringe crazies. And then when people started saying hello, I'd start thinking, what are they talking to me? You know, and I was thinking, oh, I just got used to not people ignoring you, walking away, walking across the road.
Lots of stuff got said, lots of stuff got shouted. Are there any things that you regret saying?
Oh, I remember one night getting into an argument with some of my uncles. All of my uncles, actually. Yeah, some of the things I regret saying that night, but at the time, you know, you're young, you're hot-blooded. You know that the people who are on your side, you'd still have room in a phone box if you wanted to get them together. So you just had to have a deep sense of inner strength. You just couldn't afford to be seen to go soft, to go backwards, to back down to anyone.
Hone Harawira continues to fight for Māori, but these days as a Member of Parliament and leader of the Mana Party.
I don't get caught up too much in the government side of things when I go to Waitangi, eh?
And maybe in a couple of years we'll be called sellouts. I think I've been called a coup-upper's wife.
Yeah.
So was it all worth it? Protest resulted in some progress, including the formation of the Waitangi Tribunal in 1975.
The government realised the protesters were right, that they were heavy-handed and ignoring the treaty.
But now, I think Waitangi Day has lost its way as a platform for protest. Coming back here now, it kind of doesn't know what it is right now. What brought us here in 1971 was we saw it as an opportunity for us Māori to air our grievances. And the grievances haven't been addressed, and so we still require that platform. And so part of me just says, oh, bugger off all you other fellas. Take your massage tables and your glass bowls and your cheap t-shirts, keep those out of here. That's not what today's for. But I might be wrong. You know, other people clearly want that. But it's not for me. I'm heading home to see the mokos. My son's whānau have banned English at home. Yet when I was with Ngā Tamatoa, the language was on the brink of extinction. These are four of my mokopuna, my son Boyd and his partner Janine. Speaking te reo Māori is part of everyday life for my son's whānau.
The main thing is to just get used to hearing themselves speak reo Māori and get their ears used to listening to it come from their own mouth rather than someone who's learned.
But for Ngā Tamatoa, Māori language was a battle yet to be won.
Good morning, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Smith.
When Hannah Jackson and Lee Smith addressed Parliament's Māori Affairs Select Committee in 1972, most of Ngā Tamatoa couldn't speak our own language.
We claim that Māori educational underachievement and the birth of the Māori school dropouts can be traced directly back to the decision to educate Māoris only in English.
It is high time civilised multicultural attitudes took over from the ignorance born of white racism.
So on September